Who should the Royals target if they plan to move Seth Lugo? I'll give you my thoughts next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is a Tuesday edition of Locked On Royals in the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can catch me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can check out this channel on wherever you listen to podcasts. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey, and YouTube. Just be sure to hit the follow button and subscribe. For you new listeners wondering how this channel works, my podcast, anything else we do on this channel, well, we bring you episodes Monday through Friday, 30-minute episodes, as well as some quick 60-second YouTube shorts after each and every Royals game. And brand new to the channel, at least over the last few weeks, we are bringing you the Royals Postcast, which is hosted by Chance Lebo, and he'll come to you live after each game for about 15 minutes. Now, before we get started, I want to tell you that today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So get started today with FanDuel. It was yet another Royals loss on the season last night where there was little to no run support for Michael Wacha. There was little to no run support in general, and they fell 6-2. We are not going to use any part of today's episode to recap what happened. It wasn't a very entertaining game. And if you love West Coast baseball like me, where you get to stay up late, last night was not one of those times I enjoyed. That was pretty much a snooze fest if you were rooting for Kansas City. If you're rooting for Seattle, probably a much different feeling in staying up and watching Randy Arozarena hit 2 home runs and George Kirby deal, as well as the bullpen pitched pretty well, other than Thornton, I believe it was. But the Royals will have another opportunity tonight. They will send Michael Lorenzen to the mound to try and even up this series. But there's no sense in us talking about tonight's game, how they can go about winning this game, how they can tag Emerson Hancock for a few runs. It's time to start talking about the bigger picture here. And one of the bigger picture things that we're going to be covering over the next few weeks, and this also includes the Major League Baseball draft. We'll have some coverage, not live coverage, or we're probably not going to do an episode that is just dedicated to the draft. We'll have segments that are dedicated to talking about who they took and why they took. But I would say that the majority of this month will have a lot of trade deadline segments and who they might go after and who the Royals could be looking to move. If there's any smoke, I'm sure we will talk about it and who they might be talking to, what players they might be interested in. But I thought for the first segment today, talking about the trade proposals, or at least putting together some hypothetical trades for Seth Lugo, would be a good thing to do. We all know, and we're not naive, that Seth Lugo is the number one trade chip for Kansas City. And it's unfortunate to talk about unloading one of the Royals' best free agent acquisitions in recent memory. I mean, going back to the offseason of 2024, this has just been a phenomenal signing. Everything they have gotten out of Seth Lugo has been well above what I thought would even be possible. But this is a business about winning, and the Royals are not doing that. Their season is not over. And as you've heard me say before, just because you are selling one of your top arms does not mean you are setting yourself back 4 or 5 more seasons. I can tell you this wholeheartedly. I can tell you this with a lot of confidence. The Royals expect to compete again in 2026. So whatever move and whatever decision they try to make, it is going to be to try to better this team and to better next year's team. I do not see them selling anybody and acquiring 18 to 19-year-old players that won't be ready for 3 or 4 years. They're going to try to fix the issues of this year and better themselves for next year. And I will say this, and I know that I can be called out for being a little bit too optimistic at times, and you want me to rant and talk about the negative things. But if there is any positive any positive about a down year, right? When you go to the postseason, and we'll discuss this in the third segment, but if you overachieve one year and then you fall back down to earth a little bit, and your owner and GM are still very adamant about building a winner and being competitive and being aggressive in free agency, sometimes those down years really highlight where your true weaknesses are. And yes, you could absolutely have said that when the Royals lost in the postseason and said it's the offense. The offense was the issue. But over the course of a season, they were a middle of the pack group. They were fantastic with runners in scoring position. They had 3 of the top 5 hitters with runners in scoring position. They had a league average bat in Michael Massey. They had a defense first center fielder in Kyle Isbell. They were able to compete by bringing in some guys last minute in October. They were able to compete with Tommy Pham and Yuli Gurriel and Robbie Grossman. But they had a fine year from Freddie Fermin. They had a good pitching staff. And so they didn't really like the way the market fell, but this team just didn't do enough offensively. Next offseason, if you finish with a bottom 5 offense, I have no doubt in my mind that it's the end of the road for a lot of guys that we are seeing right now. But it doesn't have to be until the offseason. You can try to attack this at the deadline and simply putting feelers out there for who would be interested for Seth Lugo. And to me, there's 3 teams that really pop. 2 are very obvious. One I'm throwing in there a little bit last minute. The number one obvious choice for me is the Chicago Cubs. Now, the Cubs rotation, it's middle of the pack. They're going to be a playoff team on the National League side. They've got such an effective offense. That's a rowdy fan base that's hungry to get back to October, and I see the front office honoring that. And I look at their farm system, and there's more than a few guys, which is why I put them as the number one trade target or someone to trade with of these 3. You look at the Cubs' top 30, and there are more than a handful of guys that could be playing at the big league level right now. They're just blocked in Chicago. You've got Owen Cassie, who we talked about on a Mailbag Friday last week. He's the number one prospect. He's right now in AAA Iowa, hitting .263 with a .372 OBP and a .504 slug. He's an outfielder. Think the Royals might need that? Absolutely. I also like Kevin Alcantara. He's got 10 at-bats with Chicago this year, but he's tearing it up in AAA. You talk about a huge frame, tall and skinny frame, 6'6", 188, but his field was a 60 grade from his scouting report. He's quick, a 60 grade there. Power's a little bit above average at 55. Arms a little bit above average at 55 as well. Or I should just say about average to slightly above average, but the number 3 prospect in the Cubs system. You also can look at James Triantos, who's a second baseman and outfielder. We know the Royals are all about guys with utility there. He's another player that's down there for the AAA Iowa Cubs. He's hitting .257 with a .673 OPS. So not as great numbers as the other 2 there. And it really comes down to who the Cubs would be willing to move there. I understand they may not want to part ways with 2 guys in their top 10 that are, right on the cusp of the big league level. There's a couple of arms that would make sense for them. Jackson Wiggins is going to the futures game. I'd be pretty surprised if they were to move him in any sort of deal. You've got Jack Neely, their number 14 prospect, whose ETA is 2025. And there was one more that I thought was pretty interesting. Yeah, Ben Cowles is another guy in AAA Omaha. Not great numbers this year, but still seen as somebody as a top 25 prospect in the system. But for me, it's those first 3 that I mentioned. Those are all guys that could play in Kansas City right now and would be much of an upgrade over what you are putting in left field and center field. And, Jack Caglione's not going anywhere, but maybe they could put together better numbers than you're seeing from any of those outfielders right now. If the Royals want to go for the Cubs, there are multiple guys that could be in Kansas City right now, have years of control, and have some pretty good upside. Then you look at the Dodgers. The only reason I would say the Dodgers are below the Cubs is there's not many guys that are ready right now. I mean, I look at Alex Freeland, a guy who can play shortstop and third base, really high OBP in AAA for Oklahoma City and the Dodger system. But he's the only one in the top 10 other than Nick Frasso, who's another name I like, a right-handed arm for the Dodgers that's ready to go either in the bullpen or the rotation or start every day in the lineup. But the Dodgers are going to be a team who have the 24th best ERA in baseball, searching for somebody that can stabilize that rotation a little bit, give them a cushion while everybody's getting healthy. James Outman is another name there who had a down year last year, but his rookie season was phenomenal. Maybe you go for him and then you add in a prospect or two to really get a haul from the Dodgers. And you also can understand that LA isn't as tied to their prospects as most teams are. They understand that their team is always going to be through free agency and through trade. Not saying they can't develop, they absolutely can, but they're such a loaded group that there are so many talented players in that system that are just blocked and will be blocked for a really long time. Now, the third team, and we'll do this rather quickly, I believe that Toronto can be a team that the Royals are looking at. They are someone that's got a pretty impressive offense in terms of their star power, but they need a little bit more stability in the rotation. Like the Cubs, they are middle of the pack, and there are some names that make sense for the Royals to try to go out there and target. If you want some of that versatility, you have Orelvis Martinez, who plays second and third base. He's already been up to Toronto before. That was last year, but played in just one game. I'm actually not sure 100% if he has been banged up at all. He struggled this year for Buffalo in AAA, but he's still got that prospect status, and he's just, I believe, 23. So somebody young, years of control, and a higher upside prospect in that system. They've got a lot of arms, though, that the Royals would be intrigued by. Another shortstop that might be intriguing to them would be Josh Kasevich. Then the one pitcher I believe that I had highlighted on this list, Adam Macko, not great numbers, but a left-handed guy that you could look into, really try to mold into something special, especially if you're going to be moving Seth Lugo. Maybe one of those names is somebody you could plug into the rotation and try to pair nicely with Brian Sweeney, Zach Bove, and Mitch Stetter there. So Toronto would be one of those sleeper teams maybe the Royals could look into if the Blue Jays are trying to put the chips in and really go for one of those wild card spots, or better yet, try to compete with the Rays and the Yankees that at the top of the American League East. So who do you think the Royals should trade Seth Lugo to? And is there any prospect or player that you have your eye on? Let us know in the YouTube comments or let us know on Twitter. Coming up next, should the Royals be in a fire sale coming up at the deadline, or should they just sell off a few pieces? I'll give you my opinion next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. If you want to find us, you can check us on wherever you listen to your podcast. Want to tell you about one of our sponsors today in Monarch Money. Ever wished managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can be. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch Money puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money and use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off on your first year. That's monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONMLB, LOCKEDONMLB, for half off on your first year. So get started today with Monarch Money. Don't waste any time. Stop sending your money to places that you're no longer using, subscriptions you're no longer using. Have everything in order. And as I said, a complete financial command center just for you. The next part of this, in discussing Seth Lugo, discussing the Royals for the remaining part of 2025, discussing what they could do in 2026, are they going to be selling just one piece and trying to fit some of the guys they would be acquiring into the big league lineup or into the big league rotation or big league bullpen? The next part of that is that just going to be move number one and maybe the only move, or is that going to be the first domino where you're trading Seth Lugo and then you're going to be looking to trade Michael Lorenzen, and then you're looking to trade John Schreiber, and then you're looking to trade Carlos Estevez? There are so many names on this roster that could be intriguing trade candidates. And the good news for the Royals is they're not in a selling position where they got to get rid of just about everybody. Like, they're not forced to trade off some of these guys just because, they can't expect them back next year and they need to get value now. There were so many Royals teams at the deadline where you looked at a player and you said, you got to trade him now. He's not coming back. You need to get what you can. And no matter what value it is, you pull the trigger on that deal. The Royals are in a much better spot than they were even 2 years ago approaching the deadline. They're, of course, not in as great of a spot as they were last year, but they can look at some of these guys that are under club control or under contract and go, it's not going to work out this year in terms of us getting to October, but we want them back next year. The first name that comes to mind is Carlos Estevez. Like, Carlos Estevez, you signed for 3 years. He has been a fantastic acquisition in terms of the number of saves that he's been racking up. I get that relievers can be a bit volatile, and 1 year they're great, next year not so much, and who knows, Estevez could have a bad second half, and then you regret hanging on to him a little bit. I'm just saying it's more complicated because he is someone that is making a chunk of money, and some teams might not be that desperate to take him on and then that contract. And who knows, maybe the Royals have to pay some of that contract so they can get a better prospect in return. But Michael Lorenzen, who takes the ball tonight, he's somebody that's on a 1 year deal. And that's a rental piece. And everybody's always looking for pitching. And they want that depth. And Michael Lorenzen could give a team depth in the same way the Royals needed depth. The Rangers were somebody that understood we are trending in a direction of being at home in October, and we don't expect Michael Lorenzen back next year. And the Royals went and traded Walter Pennington, and they got Lorenzen in return. You could strike a deal like that, and the Royals could add another piece to the bullpen, or maybe somebody that could become that number 6, number 7 starter, or somebody that could come off the bench and help your lineup a little bit. John Schreiber's another name. He will be a free agent next year. You want that bullpen help. You want somebody that's thrown a lot of innings over the last 2 years. That's somebody with a funky angle from the right side teams could be intrigued by. If you really want to sell high on someone, Steven Cruz would make a lot of sense. He's throwing 1,000,000 miles an hour, breakout year. The advanced numbers tell you that this is very much expected. The ERA, the opponent's batting average, like what he's throwing, the spin he's getting, the velocity, the limiting of the hard hit rate, this is all being backed up. He's not lucky and he's just waiting for a downfall. This is someone that could be a power arm for a playoff team right now. I could see the Royals saying, we want to build a very good bullpen next year, and the fact that Hunter Harvey doesn't look like he's coming back anytime soon, we want to have a big 3 with Cruz, Erceg, and Carlos Estevez next year. But the Royals also need to understand, which I'm sure they do, they're able to develop pitching. That has become a common thing over the last 1.5 to 2 years. I'll even go back a little bit further than that. In 2023, they showed they could develop Cole Reagans. They were able to get some value out of guys in the bullpen. Even guys like Angel Serpa, they have turned into a better version of what he was back in 2023. They turned Steven Cruz into something. They've turned Daniel Lynch into something. Noah Cameron, Chris Bubich. So you shouldn't be fearful of trading some of these guys because your confidence should be very high in finding another one of them. I look in AAA. Okay, Andrew Hoffman was not good in his debut. He got shelled, and I did feel they put him in a bad spot for his big league debut, but the bullpen was taxed at that point. I could see the Royals turning Andrew Hoffman into a stud for that bullpen. I absolutely could see that. He's got wipeout stuff. He's got the kick change. And if you were to trade someone like John Schreiber, I would put Andrew Hoffman in the bullpen. And I would have faith that Brian Sweeney and Zach Bova, Mitch Stetter could work with him to turn him into what we've seen Steven Cruz become. Just out of nowhere, and now he's in the circle of trust. So part of this fire sale is asking yourself, can you get something out of some of these players? And is there someone to replace them? Because the Royals could also be looking at the deadline like the Tigers did last year. We have gotten more competitive. We just need more help offensively. And we might try to make a push for Jack Flaherty in the offseason, which they did and brought him back. And the Royals could be looking like that as well. Hey, we feel we can get Seth Lugo back and we're willing to pay him. But as for this year, it can only benefit us if we try to get value for him now and then have him back next year. And that's what we're going to know here pretty shortly from the Royals. If it's sell mode or if it's partial sell mode or if they find a way to rattle off, 8 or 9 in the row and now they're buying again. But Seth Lugo is looking like one of those players they can get value for. And it does not mean it's the end of the road. He may sign elsewhere, but I can see the Royals being in the hunt once again. You just need offensive help. And if Michael Lorenzen is getting some buzz, and John Schreiber is, and Steven Cruz, I'm sure Angel Serpa is as well, you should be looking into selling some of those players. It's much easier to replace bullpen arms and try to develop those guys than it is to replace an offensive threat. There just doesn't feel like there's many guys offensively for the Royals they can trade right now. They're not going to trade Salvador Perez. They're not trading Vinny. They're not trading India. They're not trading Bobby Witt Jr., of course. Garcia would generate a lot of interest because he's a shortstop playing third, but I don't see the Royals moving him in any type of deal. If they're going to be making trades, I believe it's 100% going to be on the pitching side of things because they've shown that they're able to replace a lot of guys. I mean, they lost Cole Reagans for a chunk of time, and Noah Cameron's out here with a sub 2.5 ERA. And that was all development. And of course, I tip my cap to him and just bettering himself. But they're showing a consistent output, I should say, of strong arms, whether it be in the bullpen or in the rotation. And if you trade off some of those pieces, you can better your lineup and also start developing some other guys you expect to be there next year. Let's take our final break of the show. When we come back, let's talk about playing with expectation. I know we've done this before, but in my opinion, it's why we look at this Royals team so differently than some of those previous bad Royals teams. That's next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can check out our channel for daily content and find our Royals postcast tonight, which is hosted by Chance Lebo, and he'll be coming to you live for 15 minutes right after the game. Let's give a shout out to our title sponsor in FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing. And whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. For my pick, I believe I was right on one of two picks that I had. So let's stick with the Royals and the Mariners because they're playing so late tonight. I will take the under for strikeouts from Michael Lorenzen. I will take the over on hits for Julio Rodriguez, and I'll take the over on RBIs for Cal Raleigh. There's so much that has changed in 365 days. The Royals were a playoff team, I wouldn't say from start to finish last year. They hit a bit of a rut around this time. It was mid to late June going into July where they started to slide back a little bit. And then once they hit the All-Star break, they were able to catch fire once again. Bobby Witt Jr. was hitting like 560 something, it felt like, for the better part of July. They beat up on some bad teams, and they put themselves firmly in a playoff spot. Now the Royals find themselves teetering on having the third worst record in the American League, and they're 5.5 games of a playoff spot, out of a playoff game spot, I should say. So now this becomes the evaluation part of the year where you really try to look in the mirror and see who you are and what you might be able to become. And I'm sure the Royals clubhouse is remaining positive and they feel that a turnaround is just about to happen. And they still have to go out there and prove it. But we can be optimistic if you want to be optimistic and say that this team can hit its stride, have a really good second half, and get right back in the hunt. Because what has not changed is how mediocre the American League is, aside from a couple of the top teams. I mean, everybody else is just jammed together. And the second half is still a long, long time. But the Royals also need to be smart about Can they really do it? Can they get hot for a week or can they get hot for a month? And for this team, it's been very clear to me that playing with the expectation that was set for them has drastically affected how they've played. And I don't speak to these players on the daily. I'm sure that a lot of them have confidence, but this is sports in general. When you overachieve one year, when nobody's expecting a lot of you, it's very easy to play free and easy. You are playing with house money. And the Royals, though people had picked them to win the division, there were a lot of people that said, we got to see it first. And nobody's going to be floored and nobody's going to be panicking if the Royals, win 78 games in 2024, because it would still be a 22 win improvement from the previous year. And we said this in the offseason. It is always so much more difficult to say you improved after a bad year than improve on a year where you got to the ALDS. You get to the ALDS. Well, what's the next step? Technically getting to game 5 of the ALDS, forcing an elimination game. The Royals lost. I guess it would have been in game 4. So yeah, they needed to even up the series and have one more opportunity to force elimination game. That would technically be an improvement, but many people went, they got to get to the ALCS. So the 2 remaining teams in the American League to get to the World Series, that's what some of the people put on you. That was the expectation. And it's hard to live up to that. It's not that we should excuse their play. That's not what I'm trying to get at here. But last year, that was a team that was improving on 106 losses. And they made some moves. They went out there and brought in Lugo and Waka. They had an MVP finalist. They had 2 Cy Young finalists. They had 4 or 5 All-Stars. They were healthy. They beat up on the White Sox. They beat up on a lot of teams that were under 500. And they were able to build a pretty big cushion in May and June. They were, 15 games over 500. And then you were able to go through some rough patches. The Royals can't afford that anymore. They can't afford another 6-game losing streak. They can't afford another 4 or 5-game losing streak. They have to play 10 to 15 games over 500 the rest of the way. And I've seen crazier things happen in baseball, but every time we evaluate this team, we talk about looking in the mirror, they have not responded that well to it. Whether it be they feel they've got a lot of time, they feel things are going to loosen up a little bit. You got a month left before the deadline. And I'm not sure how you could look at this team if they trade Seth Lugo, they trade Lorenzen, they trade a few bullpen pieces and see them getting better in the second half. You could see the offense getting better, but now who's starting games for the Royals? Who are you calling up? Who are you moving from the bullpen to start games that could give you as good or better production than Seth Lugo? That's going to be the grind of the second half. But it doesn't mean that this year has to be an absolute failure. If you go out there and acquire some pieces and play 5 to 6 games over 500 in the second half, make it interesting, and you've acquired some pieces to be competitive in 2026, that can still be seen as a positive development. Right now, it feels like you're just stuck in rock bottom. There's nothing to look forward to. They're not winning games. The offense isn't getting any better. But there still can be exciting times on the horizon. It's just that challenge of playing with expectations. I have covered teams in the past that they played some of their best football, basketball, or baseball when nobody was caring about them, right? And why it's more painful than 2023, you didn't think of anything of 2023. You might have checked out after the first series of the year. And when they were 20-something and 60-something, losses don't sting because you're nowhere close. What's the difference between loss 55 and loss 91? Nothing. Absolutely nothing in a down year. Now, what's the difference between loss 22 for the Royals this year and loss number 47? Loss 21, you were still over 500. You were feeling good about where you were at. Loss 46, or I guess loss 47 would be tonight if they don't win. But loss 46, you're just feeling desperate at this point. You feel like they can't turn it around. And baseball is such a long season where there will come a point in time, even if they are, 5, 6, 7 games under 500, where you enjoy watching them. It's about how they're playing. If the Royals acquire some young talent, some young bats, and Caglione's playing better, and the young guys are thriving, and you're looking at the second half and, they're getting hot, they're playing good baseball, they'll be enjoyable to watch. But the month of June was ghastly. And this road trip, after what we saw last night, hopefully it can change on a dime tonight. But you're just not feeling good about what's ahead. And that's that pressure of playing with immense expectation. As we said in the offseason, there had only been one time, 2014 and 2015, since they won the World Series in 1985, where they went to the postseason in back-to-back years. So they went the 29-year drought. They went to the playoffs in 14, 15, then didn't return till 2024. If they were to make it this year, the second time since 1985 they've had back-to-back years with postseason berths. So it would have meant a lot to the city, as J.J. Piccolo said. But that's a lot of pressure to put on the team that historically has not done that. And I think we're seeing that. We're seeing a team that was very fortunate last year, was very healthy, had some great years from numerous players, and this year, not so much. That's why they're 39 and 46. They're not completely out of it, but they're certainly not in the deep of it, I guess I should say. They're not in the hunt anymore. 5.5 back, you're not within striking distance. You get under 3 games, you get back to second place, maybe we can have that conversation. But as for right now, looking yourself in the mirror, this is not a playoff team. And by the end of the month, we're going to be seeing what moves the Royals will be making to maybe better themselves this year and next year. Or maybe, in a miracle, they find a way to get as hot as they've been all season long, and it's to make a little bit of a push here in the second half. As for me, I'm not going to buy into that until they prove they can play their hottest baseball of the entire season beginning tonight. It'll be Michael Lorenzen going up against Emerson Hancock, the former first-round pick back from the Georgia Bulldogs in 2020. Well, that'll do it for another edition of Locked On Royals in the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale and find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Tomorrow, we're going to break down a little bit more of what happened in tonight's game and maybe some of the smoke around who the Royals could be taking in the Major League Baseball draft. But until tomorrow, you take it easy, Kansas City.